epidemic of gambling out there, and it's getting worse and worse. And I think it's a bit hidden from the public, and there's a lot of people who can't quit. You know, some suicides.
The infamous scandals of Peter Shilton. His ex-wife just revealed everything. England's greatest goalkeeper, a world record holder with 1,249 appearances and 125 caps. A legend who seemed to have it all. But behind the scenes, for nearly half a century, Shilton lived a shadow life that nobody knew about. A double life so dark, it nearly destroyed him completely. This is the story of how a sporting hero became a cautionary tale and how his wife's discovery of a single bank statement changed everything. Peter Shilton carried a secret that weighed heavier than any save he ever made. For 45 years, he lived two completely separate lives. During the day, he was the ultra-professional athlete everyone admired. He trained hard, he worked harder, he stretched his body, hung from stairwells to elongate his spine, did everything right on the pitch. He was disciplined, he was focused, he was the man England trusted to protect the goal. But when night fell, everything changed. He would gamble, he would bet until the early hours of the morning, he would lose thousands, and then he would wake up and do it all over again. This compartmentalization was so complete that he convinced himself it was normal. He kidded himself that because he worked hard and trained hard, the gambling was just a hobby, just something he did on the side. If you would like this story to get more views, please use the hype feature and give hype to this video right now. Your support helps stories like this reach people who need to hear them. The real awakening came when his wife, Steph, started noticing strange behavior. He was secretive. He hid his phone. He withdrew from family. He became moody and unpredictable. Steph thought what any person would think in that situation. She believed he was having an affair. The secretive phone calls, the late nights, the emotional distance. Every sign pointed to another woman. So she did what many spouses do when suspicion builds. She checked his bank statements. What she found was not the evidence of infidelity. It was far worse. In a single month, Peter Shilton had lost £18,000 gone in 30 days. The smoking gun was not a text message or a love letter. It was the banking record showing money hemorrhaging out to gambling companies month after month after month. Steph later described the bookie as the other woman in their marriage, because that is exactly what it was. The gambling had consumed his intimacy. It had consumed his finances. It had consumed his emotional availability. For decades, the bookmaker was his primary relationship. But the roots of this recklessness went back much further, back to 1980, when Peter Shilton was at the absolute height of his fame. He was England's first-choice goalkeeper. He was shortly about to transfer to Southampton. He was on top of the world. He seemed invincible. He had everything ahead of him. That is when he made a decision that would foreshadow everything to come. He was discovered in a car with a married woman named Tina. The incident itself was scandalous enough, but then he did something that showed just how out of control he really was. He tried to flee. He attempted to evade the situation. And in trying to escape, he crashed his vehicle directly into a lamppost. This was not an accident. This was the collision between his private life and his public reality. The police arrived at the scene. They found him behind the wheel. They tested him for alcohol and found he was driving under the influence. This was not a minor traffic violation. This resulted in a conviction for drink driving and a substantial 15-month driving ban. His first wife, Sue Flitcroft, stood by him. She forgave him. She stayed with him. That forgiveness and silence created a pattern that would persist for the next 3 decades. It created an environment where Shilton believed he could do whatever he wanted, and it would be covered up or excused away. The addiction itself evolved over time as technology changed. In the 1970s and 80s, his betting was limited by physical reality. He would go to betting shops, he would go to the racecourse, he would place a few bets and then leave. The friction was built in. You had to actually walk into a place, face other people, conduct yourself publicly. There was natural limitation. There were natural pauses. He would describe these early days as simply having a few bob on the horses, just a normal part of football culture at the time, just how footballers socialised and relaxed. But then the internet came. The digital revolution changed everything about gambling. Online gambling removed every single friction point. Suddenly, Peter Shilton could sit at home at any hour. He could bet continuously. He could place wagers at 3 in the morning, at 4 in the morning. He never had to leave his chair. He never had to face another human being. The addiction worsened dramatically when he moved online. He has admitted this himself. The digital platform provided an endless loop of betting, an anesthetized cycle of wins and losses, completely detached from the reality of physical money leaving his hand. It was numbers on a screen, just numbers going down. And the gambling industry knew exactly what they were doing. Shilton was not just a customer, he was a VIP client. He was a high net worth loser. The bookmakers would send him Christmas hampers to keep him betting. Christmas hampers, as if they were thanking him for losing money to them. Rather than triggering any responsible gambling intervention, when they saw the scale and frequency of his losses, they incentivized him further. They created what Shilton himself called a false world. He was trapped in a system designed specifically to extract maximum value from his compulsion. When his wife Steph eventually tried to help him by asking a gambling company to close his account, they refused. They would not do it. They cited data protection and client confidentiality and privacy regulations. What they were really doing was protecting their revenue stream. They were protecting his losses because his losses made them money. There were structural barriers preventing him from getting help. He was not just fighting his own psychology and his own addiction. He was fighting a sophisticated corporate apparatus that had every incentive to keep him betting. The financial collapse became impossible to hide in 2011. After 40 years of marriage, Sue Flitcroft and Peter Shilton divorced. Friends said Sue had been a rock to him through everything. But the relentless financial pressure finally made the marriage untenable. The underlying rot caused by decades and decades of gambling had made staying together impossible. The money was gone, the savings were depleted, the financial pressure was suffocating. They could not survive it anymore. Then, in March of 2013, the full extent of the disaster became public. Peter Shilton was arrested for drink driving. He was driving a Jaguar XF near Steph's home when he was pulled over and arrested by police. He was brought to Colchester Court to face charges. It should have been a routine proceeding, a fine of roughly £1,000, a standard penalty for a standard offence, a matter that would be handled and forgotten within hours. But then his legal representative Paul Torn made a statement to the court that shocked everyone listening. Shilton could not pay the fine in a single lump sum. His finances were complicated. He was going through divorce proceedings. He was being forced to sell his house. He was struggling with liquidity. He could not afford to pay what he owed. The magistrate, Ilona Perkins Van Mill, did not accept this excuse. She ordered Shilton to pay the full £1,020 before he left the building. If he could not pay, he would face custody. He would go to jail. This was the moment. This was the public unravelling. Here was a man with 1,249 competitive appearances and 125 England caps, a world record holder, an icon of English football, standing in court unable to pay a £1,000 fine. He was liquid poor. His assets were being liquidated. His house was being sold, and he was driving a luxury car that he could not afford because of the appearance he needed to maintain. The contrast was almost surreal. The trappings of wealth remained. The Jaguar XF was real, but underneath, the foundation had completely crumbled. This is what high-functioning addiction looks like. It is the fur coat with nothing underneath. It is the appearance of success hiding total financial collapse. It is the legend who cannot pay his bills. But something shifted after that court hearing, after that moment of public humiliation. Steph Shilton took action. She refused to let him continue this way. She demanded that he face what he was doing. She gave him an ultimatum. He remembers looking at her after a costly weekend of betting, when he was trying to ask for yet another financial advance. He caught her watching him, not with anger, with despair. And in that moment, the denial finally broke. He said to himself, "What are you doing at your age? You have had 40 years to win. You are an addict." That admission changed everything, but stopping was not as simple as deciding to stop. When Peter Shilton quit gambling after 45 years of addiction, his body and mind went into withdrawal. This is where the story becomes truly significant. Most people think of gambling as a psychological problem only, a mental habit, a behavioural issue. But the reality is far more complex and far more physical. Peter Shilton, who works in healthcare, compared his withdrawal to the withdrawal of someone coming off heroin. Class A narcotics. That is how severe it was. That is how real it was. His nervous system, habituated to 45 years of adrenaline spikes and cortisol releases from betting, went into shock. He experienced acute restlessness. His mind could not focus. He had what he described as brain fog. He could not concentrate. He could not think clearly. He had hot sweats. His body would break out in sweat for no reason. He had tremors. His hands would shake. He had severe sleep disturbance. He could not sleep properly for months. The physical symptoms were brutal and real, and they lasted for approximately 1 year. 1 full year of his brain and body trying to rebalance themselves. 1 year of rewiring. 1 year of fighting to reset the chemical patterns that 45 years of addiction had created in his mind and body. During this difficult time, he found solace in golf. Not professionally, just golf. A sport that offered a healthier dopamine feedback loop. A sport that gave him focus and competition without the destruction, without the financial hemorrhage, without the lying. Golf became his salvation. It became the thing that helped stabilize him mentally. It gave him something to do with his hands and his mind that was not destructive. His recovery eventually led him to write about his experience. In 2021, he published a book called Saved, Overcoming a 45-year Gambling Addiction. But he did not stop there. He became an advocate. He became a campaigner. He became someone determined to prevent others from going through what he went through. He has been vocal about the toxic relationship between football and betting. He looked at the statistics and found that 27 of the top 44 clubs in England are sponsored by gambling firms. 27 out of 44. That is more than 60%. He argues that these sponsorships create a backdoor for grooming children into gambling, the same way the culture of the 1970s and 80s groomed him. Young people grow up seeing their favourite players wearing gambling company logos. They see gambling normalised at the highest levels of the sport. They see it as part of being a successful athlete. Shilton wanted to change this. He wanted to protect young people from the path he took. He joined a campaign called Big Step. The goal is to remove gambling advertising from football entirely, to break the connection between the sport and the industry that preys on fans and athletes alike. He wanted the industry regulations to change. He wanted protection for vulnerable people. He went from being a victim of the system to fighting against the system, from being groomed by the culture to trying to protect others from the same grooming, from silence and secrecy to speaking out and campaigning. The shame that kept him quiet for 45 years became the fuel for his advocacy. The financial losses are estimated to be around £1 million. Conservative estimates, it could be higher. No one will ever know exactly how much he lost because the bleeding went on for so long and touched so many accounts and so many companies. £1 million. That is the tangible cost. But the real cost cannot be measured in money. It is the cost of 45 years of living in fear, 45 years of hiding, 45 years of lies to people he loved, 45 years of his best self being locked away while his addicted self ran the show. Peter Shilton saved more shots than any goalkeeper in competitive history. 1,249 times he stood between the goal and his opponents and refused to let the ball through. He was a man of discipline and focus and strength, but for 45 years he could not save himself. He could not save his marriage. He could not save his finances. He could not save himself from the addiction that was eating him alive. It took his second wife seeing the truth in a bank statement. It took the humiliation of a courtroom. It took the physical pain of withdrawal. It took all of that before he could finally be saved. But he was saved. And now he is using his experience to try to save others. His story is a warning about the power of addiction, about the sophistication of the industries that profit from addiction, about the importance of speaking up and asking for help. It is also a story of redemption. It is a story about recovery. It is a story about a man who spent 45 years in darkness, finally stepping into the light, and then turning around to help others find their way out of the darkness too. Peter Shilton, the goalkeeper, will always be remembered as a legend. But Peter Shilton, the man who overcame addiction and chose to campaign against it, might end up making an even greater impact on the world. If this story helped you, or if you know someone struggling with addiction, please like this video, subscribe to this channel, leave a comment telling us what you think about his story, and use the hype feature to support this content. Your engagement helps us reach more people with stories that matter.